I pride myself in remembering just about every bowl game in history, and I'm trying to go back and figure out the last time Tennessee was in a major bowl game, like 03, 04,
We played Clemson in a bowl game in '03.
Peach Bowl,
Um, yep,
like it.
and lost. And the other, yeah, I mean that '04 would have really been it. I mean that was the last. Obviously, this season was the best season since uh since '03. So I mean that was the last
Yeah,
10-win regular season.
yeah, because Butch Jones pretty much tapped out at the Citrus Bowl level.
He never even made. He made the Outback Bowl and the
Oh, the Northwestern games,
Gator Bowl
that was a gotcha. Gator Bowl, Outback Bowl. Yep.
in Music City. They played
Yes.
Nebraska in
Yes.
2016, the last one that he made.
There's a lot of things we can dive into here concerning this football team, even though they did not play this past weekend. First thing I want to hit you on is it was kind of amusing to me, and it didn't get that much attention that, okay, you have these conference championship games over the weekend, and if anybody falters, Ohio State's there, Alabama's there. Well, somebody beat Alabama that's got the same record. So why did they not have, why did the Vols not have any kind of, I know Hendon Hooker's injured, and, it makes sense that they would be far less competitive in a playoff situation, unfortunately, because of that situation. But if you're just looking at resumes, Alabama's like on Nick Saban's on this campaign to push his team into the playoff. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't hear a word about Tennessee, and they won the matchup head to head, and they got the same record in the same conference.
If you can explain it, I would love to hear, because there was no reason for any of that. I do think Alabama went on the attack because they know how big their brand is in college football and how much all of the national media just, they love them some Alabama. My goodness, they just can't stand not talking about Alabama, it seems like. And I'm sure the administration there knows that. There were a lot of Alabama fans. Obviously, Tennessee fans were complaining about this, exactly this. It was sort of what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think it got a lot of national exposure, but what you're saying was definitely noticed, obviously, by the Tennessee fan base. We were very upset about it. But the response from Alabama fans was like, well, Saban got asked to go on Fox, and he just was doing. First of all, no, he didn't. I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't think that he was asked to go on Fox. I think that as I said, the Alabama administration was going on the offensive. He did like 6 different interviews. So on a couple on ESPN, one on the Fox halftime show, and they know that the committee watches all of the conference championship games together. And so he goes on the halftime of the conference championship game that's happening at the time, and he goes and pleads his case. He doesn't really have a case. Ultimately, his case was we lost less bad than Tennessee. And that's not a case. It's ridiculous. Tennessee and Alabama, neither was going to make it into the playoff this weekend. But I think ultimately it was the media just wanting a little drama. They know Alabama's a brand everybody loves talking about. And so they go out there and they act like Alabama might have a chance. Well, let's talk about Alabama's resume. And then there was nothing there. The best win they had was over Ole Miss, Texas, I guess.
Texas, Mississippi State. You throw them all in the same 8-4 bucket.
I mean, yeah, it was nothing even close to Tennessee's wins, a 27-point win against LSU, and then obviously the head-to-head win over Alabama. It was just completely ridiculous, and I think it shows just how much love they have for Alabama. I mean, it just is crazy at this point, and they've done what they've done. We know why they're so huge and highly regarded, but this season they did nothing. They relative to Nick Saban, is this the worst season he's had at Alabama outside of his very first year? I think it might be. And they were
9-3, 2010.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
They won the bowl game 10-3.
Yeah, but I mean, relative to what he's done, one of his worst seasons ever, they did nothing, and they're still getting to plead their case for the college football playoff. It's just completely absurd. But that's the way of the college football world at the moment. So,
Charlie, I take calls almost every day, and I would say, based on the feedback I get with dozens, hundreds, whatever it turns out to be, it seems about half and half in regards to the split between we want teams to earn their way into the playoff versus there's a large segment of fans out there that just, even if their team's not involved, I'm not talking about just Alabama fans that just say, just put, regardless of, okay, well, they lost and they lost and they lost, just put Ohio State and Alabama in the playoff because we want the best teams with the most talent in the playoff. There's a lot of people that argue that.
That's an odd take. Why play this season then? Why do that?
Yes.
Why play the games? Don't play the games if that's what you're going to do. At the beginning of the season, just look at the rosters and go like, oh, they have the most 5-star guys. That's the playoff. What are you talking about? That's a ridiculous thing to say. I don't get that.
Say that.
I don't get that at all because it's one of the things that I love about bowl games. People have gotten super cynical about bowl games, and I'm super cynical about a lot of stuff. But actually, on bowl games, people get really down on it. Where there's so many opt outs and all these things. But you get some of the goofiest games ever in bowl games, and I think it's so fun. You just get to sit around at the holidays. Yeah,
I love bowl games.
I do too. You sit around at the holidays, and this my opinion has actually sort of changed. I was one of those more cynical people about it, but then over this time, people were like, "Oh, all the opt outs ruins bowl games." Like bowl games were virtually meaningless before. Why not just enjoy them for what they are?
Yeah,
they're just
they're
these
TV
fun
shows.
matchups. But you get brag, like if Tennessee beats Clemson, they didn't win a championship, but you get to brag that you beat Clemson, you beat Dabo, you beat the guy. Dabo's over here flapping his gums about Tennessee flipping burgers after the South Carolina game. Then he goes and blows it against South Carolina also. And so that's a fun storyline going in. And now they get to play each other and they get to have it out. I think it's great. And yeah, I mean, if you're just going to say, oh, well, Alabama has the best chance to do, well, should have won the game. They should have won. That's not how any of this works. And that's not how it should work. That's crazy. I haven't heard too many people say something like that. I believe
a lot of people that call me say that. Well, Tennessee typically has a schedule that's typical to most major teams in America where they schedule one big team out of conference. This is one reason why I love bowl games. Well, I'm into comparisons. That's what we do here. We're comparing conferences, teams, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, with the opt-outs, it becomes less legitimate. But we know Tennessee is going to play Kentucky every year and South Carolina and Georgia, and then they're going to play semi-familiar teams from the other side. We're not going to see Tennessee play Clemson. We're not going to see them play Purdue. We're not going to see them play Northwestern. Those games will never happen otherwise. I like to see different teams play.
I love it. And again, just some of the weirdness that happens. Like you get UCF beating, was it Auburn? UCF beating Auburn in that undefeated season they have. Then UCF says that they're national champions and all that. I mean, it's fun stuff. I'm not going to get down on it because it's just something that I love about the holidays and this time of year. It's just one of the best things that happens. And then it transitions you into college basketball and, sort of shifts you over because basketball's happening at the same time and you're flipping between games. Like it's the perfect thing that happens right now. I love it so much. So I'm not going to complain for 1 second because yeah, I want to see what happens between Alabama and Kansas State. That I like a game like that. What if Bryce Young sits out and then Kansas State beats Alabama? That's hilarious. I don't know. I think that would be a crazy outcome, and I think it's completely possible. I almost go, why would Bryce Young play in that game? He has an extremely bright NFL future, in my opinion. And you're running the risk of getting injured or anything like that, and it's not a playoff game for him. And so I think with some of the goofy outcomes that can happen, just take it for what it is instead of complaining about sort of the turn that it's taken in recent years. I'm going to enjoy it. I like the comparison that I made on our show a couple of days ago was it's sort of like the NBA compared to college basketball. The NBA is crisp and clean, and they that every player is the best player from wherever they came from. But college basketball, the fact that everybody's not great is what makes it fun. The messiness is fun to me. You get such wild outcomes in the NCAA tournament, and you genuinely don't know what's going to happen. It's the last great drama is college sports. So just enjoy for what it is.
It's kind of like football's version of college basketball, except football does it at the end and college basketball does it at the beginning with all these strange kind of holiday classics where they
Yeah,
just kind of throw a bunch of teams together that don't normally play.
that is true. Yeah, because I mean, you had Tennessee beat Kansas a couple weeks ago in basketball, and those things happen. But yeah, in football, it does seem like all of that. The timing of everything is so huge. I said this in the last couple of weeks. This Alabama Tennessee discussion. If that South Carolina game happens in week 3 before the Florida game, or
Yeah.
even after the Florida game, maybe you beat Florida and the next week you lay an egg against South Carolina. If you're Tennessee, you get to the end of the season and the resume is the exact same, and maybe Hendon Hooker gets injured against Vandy at the end of the season, and goes out then, and or it would have been the Missouri game. Sorry, the Missouri game. He gets injured in the Missouri game, but still the outcome remains the same: 60-point win against Vandy, 40-point win against Missouri. Tennessee would have been ranked ahead of Alabama. I don't think anybody would have questioned it. It would be literally the exact same resume down to a T, but because of the timing, it would have been completely different. There's so much recency bias in everything that happens here, like with the Heisman. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute, but there's so much, like the excuses that people have been making for including Stetson Bennett are like, well, it's really a November award. Well, he didn't play that good in November either, but that's, you know, the fact that that's the take on it. Why? Why is that the case? Like November is extremely important, and you can find some incredible Heisman moments like Max Duggan in that K-State game, even though they lost. It really was kind of a Heisman moment, the way he dragged them back into that game. But like you can find that in November, but it's not like the end all be all. The games happened in September and October too. I don't know why we act like suddenly that history is erased. But that's kind of a little off topic, maybe.
You bring up a point that I bring up all the time that I would love to hear asked of the committee or at least presented to them. It's really not a question, but presented to them to say, let's admit it, this season, every season is weighted. The games are weighted. They're
Yeah.
not evaluated on the same scale September through November. They're not.
And things like common opponent is not considered like at all, almost.
It
Because if
should
you,
be.
yeah, and I mean, you look at that. Tennessee beat LSU by 27 in Baton Rouge, and then LSU beat Alabama, and nobody ever brought that up in those discussions. It was, I don't think I saw that mentioned once at a national level, and that happened. It happened, and if that had happened in October or in November, maybe it gets brought up. But it's just so, I don't want to say dishonest, but it's, I think everybody has just lost sight of what actually should be meaningful. I don't get it. And Tennessee playing at a high level for the first time in a long while has really illuminated. I already knew it, but it's really illuminated that for me this season.
I've told a number of Alabama fans this week who have called the show, I've said, there is one common opponent because obviously they all say we should be in the playoff. We're so much better than TCU. Everybody knows we would just run them off the field. You know what? That may be true. We don't know. What we do know is that TCU played Texas, Alabama played Texas. So we do have a common opponent. And I'm not trying to blow that out of proportion to like be all inclusive. This is the only evaluation, but it is a data point that's relevant. It's a data point that's relevant. And TCU played much better against Texas than Alabama did.
Yeah, they dominated Texas in that game. Texas couldn't do anything. And I just, I hope that this expansion to 12 teams alleviates some of this, because you won't have the extreme nitpicking in these spots. Like this season, Tennessee's in the playoff, TCU's in the playoff, Alabama's in the playoff, and we all just get to see it get fleshed out between really good teams at the end of the season, rather than having to be like, well, this they won by this many, they lost by this many, and but I guess the teams in that 12 spot will argue about that, but I think that's it. That holds far less weight than when we're talking about the top 4 teams in America and who they beat and the amount of points they won by or lost by or whatever. Hopefully it alleviates some of that. I'm not convinced. I think forever the human element of the college football playoff committee is going to be a problem just in perpetuity. because there's this emotional thing where you look at that A from Alabama, that little script A that they have, and it evokes certain things in your mind. National championships that they've won in the last 10 years, however many it's been, too many, in my personal opinion. And you can't take that out of the minds of the committee members. And stuff like, am I wrong? The AD at Michigan is on the playoff committee? I'm sorry. How is that allowed? Where they're in the playoff and the AD is on the committee? What are we doing? The
This is
AD.
what's crazy about that. And not just that in particular, because those kind of issues have come up and conflicts have come up in the past. But you know what the committee's always forward in saying is they just want to let all of us know when anybody whose team is involved in the discussion, they leave the room while we discuss their team. Well, if you're on a committee and your team's being discussed and you have to leave the room, well, obviously, when you come back into the room, you see, oh, Michigan, too. Like, it's not like information you don't know. It's like, okay, well, you have to then take part in the rest of the discussion that obviously impacts Michigan or that team. So does it really matter that they're not in the room?
It makes me long for the BCS computer and the playoff format. I think because you can't argue with a computer. It was annoying and we all were pissed about it back then. I mean, believe me, I remember where we were like, the computer is so stupid. But it's not like you can have the computer on for an interview on ESPN and be like, why did you do this? It's just an algorithm that it runs through. And I maybe that's the solution, is that you just go, the computer did it. I don't know. We fed in the numbers. That's what popped out. And maybe that would be the solution, because they put Boo Corrigan out there to just get slaughtered, and he sounds foolish. And I don't know. There really is no great solution here. College football is just a messy game, and that's what makes it fun. But there's just some stuff going on here that really got highlighted this season, where you just look at it and you go, what are we doing? What are we doing here? But hey, that's the way of the world in college football at the moment.
You hit on the perfect point right there with the BCS. People think I hate the BCS. That's not the complete argument. I don't hate the BCS. I hated that the BCS was limited to 2 teams. It wasn't the process of the BCS. It was, there were 2. And then most years there was a 3rd or 4th that were, well, they've got a similar resume. Why can't they be included? Because we only have 2 spots. It wasn't the BCS. It was the 2 spots.
Exactly. And the 12-team playoff, I'm so excited. And I don't really get the arguments that people made. Like, the main argument I've heard is that with a 12-team playoff, you're now going to get opt-outs in playoff games. And that's some huge detractor. Maybe. Again, I think that's overblown. I think you sit down any player and you go, in 3 games, you could be playing for a national championship. Will you play? I think almost all of them would go, yeah, absolutely, I will. Like, I don't know why all of a sudden, I mean, maybe in that like 12, 11, 10 spot, if you're a borderline NFL player and you go, I really don't want to get hurt, maybe they sit out. But even then, you don't think they're going to be enticed by, you could be lifting up a national championship trophy. Just don't. Maybe they don't play for pride at all. Like, I just think that's so cynical to just be like, these guys don't play for any pride at all. That's what you think? That they're just not gonna have anything in them as a competitor to go like, I'm gonna play for a national title? Obviously I could be proven wrong in a year, or 2 years, 2024. I could be completely proven wrong. We'll see. But to me, that just doesn't track. And then on top of that, it's more amazing football, especially the home and the non-neutral site games in that first round. That's going to be so amazing. People who are anti-expansionist, in my personal opinion, they can go kick rocks with that argument. I'm so excited for it. I'm so ready to see it.
Absolutely. And then think about this. Why isn't this brought up when we talk about, and I brought the issue or the potential issue of opt-outs up as well. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see if it happens. I don't have the answer, but I've brought that same thing up. But do we realize how many players are playing meaningless regular season games throughout the season who will be playing in the NFL? Not every NFL player plays at Alabama and Clemson. There are tons of players playing for 7-5 teams whose last month of the season are meaningless, and they still go out there every week and play hard, and
I mean,
they're going to get drafted in the NFL. They're playing meaningless games.
Tennessee, I think a great example. There's no confirmation of this yet, but Jalen Hyatt has, in my personal opinion, the best season of a wide receiver in college football this year. And he just signed this giant NIL deal with Hyatt Hotels. They announced it today, actually, just earlier today. And our theory is that it's probably a setup to promote for the bowl game. Like the bowl game is going to be very high profile, prime time, December 30th. A lot of people are going to be watching, and now they have this tie-in with Jalen Hyatt, who's going to be one of the most talked about guys on there. And that the guys on that broadcast are going to go, "Hey, look, he's with Hyatt Hotels. Isn't this cool? Or funny or whatever." And they know they're going to get that exposure if they don't actually have like a commercial or something planned. I honestly don't know. And reading the tea leaves, again, no confirmation of this at all, but I think it might mean he's going to play in this game. And he's projected as a first-round pick in some places. And so it doesn't just come, again, that's so cynical to just be like, they're all going to opt out. They don't care. Yeah, maybe like you said, maybe at Alabama and Clemson and Georgia, maybe if they get stuck in a game they don't want to play in. But otherwise, like these guys, especially at schools that like don't get to play at these super high levels every year, teams that have a surprise season like Tennessee, best season since 2003. Hopefully it continues moving forward and we don't have giant droughts of terrible football. But these teams that aren't at this level every single year, those guys are going to play. I just don't buy that. And you can give them other motivations, NIL, things like that could get them into those games too. It sort of gives them a fallback of sorts. Like a guy like Jalen Hyatt, let's say he does play, and God forbid, I don't want to speak this into existence at all. Let's say he got hurt in that game. The NIL is a huge, incredible fallback for those guys, a real insurance policy to go like, even if you miss this NFL opportunity for this year, you can come back. We'll get you set up with an NIL. You're going to be making money. You're still a huge name. Things like that. That there's a lot of things that could happen here that I don't think it's a complete oversimplification to go like, oh, these dudes will just sit out and these games are going to stink. I don't think you can say that. I just think that's totally oversimplified and doesn't take into account human nature and the things that are involved in college football right now. But again, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.